Hello listeners, I'm Timstradamus and welcome to our Paranormal Storytime. And with me as always is my talented and beautiful co-hostess, Voyse.
Good evening, Timstradamus, and welcome to all my goblins and ghouls to our eerie enclave of storytelling delights. As the moon casts its ghostly glow upon us and the shadows come to life, gather round like curious specters drawn to the whispering tales of the unknown. Prepare to be enchanted by the spine-tingling stories that lurk in the darkest corners of the web, where the line between the real and the unreal blurs like misty apparitions on a foggy graveyard eve. So, my dear listeners, fasten your mortal coils and let your imagination dance with the supernatural as we embark on this enchanting journey through the realms of the mysterious and the macabre. But beware, for in this enchanted hour, even the cutest of tales may send a shiver down your spine.
You told me this was like Casper level scary.
It might be not. Who knows?
That gave me goosebumps.
Well, Timstradamus, go ahead and pick up that hot cocoa right beside you while we go ahead and delve into these stories. For any listeners wanting to follow along, all story links are in the description below. For our first story, I call this one The Haunted Forest. Our bizarre experiences with the forest behind our house eventually forced us to move out. I was 8 years old when we first moved into the house on the edge of the forest. My parents had their doubts about buying a house with a backyard bordered by a forest. They had concerns about wild animals getting into our bins or hurting our dogs, and were worried one of us might go too far into the trees and get lost. But it was cheap. My dad liked the seclusion, my mom loved the house itself, and my siblings and I were excited about playing in the backyard and exploring the forest. Our first sign that something wasn't right was that our dogs were absolutely terrified of the forest. They never went into the forest for any reason. If a toy they'd been playing with found its way past the tree line, they would refuse to retrieve it, and when one of us went in, they would pace anxiously until we returned. On occasion, we'd notice the dogs staring at a spot in the forest in obvious distress, sometimes growling or barking, but we could never see anything there. My brother once carried one of the dogs into the trees to show her there was nothing scary about it, but she wriggled out of his grip and sprinted into the house in a panic. If we were in the backyard when it was getting dark, we sometimes heard noises, like someone was walking through the forest, sticks crunching underfoot, branches being pushed aside. If we called out, there was no response, but if we shined a flashlight around, we would occasionally catch a glimpse for just a split second of something that we could swear looked like a person walking around in the dark. My parents quickly banned us from entering the forest at all after dark, and even during the day we weren't allowed to go out of sight of the house. My sister's bedroom window looked out at the backyard and the forest beyond, and she remembers looking out her window one night and seeing a shadowy figure standing right at the edge of the backyard. She says there was something wrong with it, like it wasn't quite standing on the ground, and it was a little too tall to be a person, and it was sort of distorted, and she was convinced it was staring at her. She called for our dad, saying there was a man in the backyard staring through her window, and when he ran outside to chase off whoever it was, she continued to watch the figure. It didn't move away, but when the light from our dad's flashlight passed over it, it suddenly just wasn't there anymore. We regularly heard knocking at the back door at night with no one there. Our parents thought it was teenagers playing pranks and stopped bothering even opening the door until one rainy night when the knocking was persistent and agitated. My mom pointed out there might be someone needing shelter from the heavy rain outside, but when she opened the door, not only was there no one there, but there were no wet footprints on the porch. The knocking continued the whole time we lived there. It would happen several times in the span of a few weeks, then stop for months, then start up again. My parents eventually installed a security camera, and there was never anyone at the door. The camera wasn't all useless though. About 3 years into living there, my brother started having night terrors and sleepwalking. When he went sleepwalking, he would always go out the back door and start walking towards the forest. My mom, being a light sleeper, would hear the door open and would run out to get him before he made it into the forest. After the 3rd or 4th time it happened, my brother asked to see the camera footage because he wanted to see how he looked when sleepwalking, I guess thinking it looked funny. The footage showed him walking out onto the porch, then pausing as if listening to something and shaking his head, then reluctantly walking forward as if being pulled or forcibly guided by something. One evening, my dad was in the backyard and he heard my sister calling him from the forest, seemingly in distress. Thinking she'd gone exploring in the forest and falling over and hurt herself, he ran in and started calling for her, but quickly realized it was too dark to see her and he couldn't pinpoint where her voice was coming from. He told her to wait where she was while he grabbed a flashlight. When he ran back into the house for the flashlight, he saw my sister inside, safe and completely unconcerned. At the time, my dad hadn't told us about hearing my sister's voice in the forest. So when I heard my mom's voice coming from the forest months later, while I was outside with the dogs one evening, I didn't question it despite the fact I'd seen my mom inside recently and hadn't noticed her walk past me. My mom was calling to me, saying she'd gotten her sweater caught in some branches and needed me to come in and help her. As I walked in, the dog started barking, alerting my dad, who saw me through the window wandering into the forest. He came outside and called to me, and I said I was just helping Mom. He yelled back that Mom was inside and I needed to run back to the house as fast as I could, which I did. After this, my parents had a fence built around the backyard and started looking for a new place. In the time between the fence being built and us moving out, it got way worse. We'd hear knocking at the door more regularly, as well as tapping on the windows as if someone was walking the perimeter of the house and trying every window. We would often hear scratching and scraping sounds on the fence and voices beyond it. My brother's night terrors got more frequent, and one night, my mom didn't hear the door open when he went sleepwalking, and he woke up standing at the fence, staring into the forest with the dogs barking at him. The last morning we spent there, less than 4 years after we moved in, we woke up to find the back door fully opened, and the security camera footage showed it slowly swinging open on its own. Since moving out, my brother's sleepwalking has stopped, though he still gets night terrors and he suffers from pretty severe anxiety. A few nights ago, he called me out of the blue, and after a bit of small talk, he asked me if I think the door being opened that final night means whatever was out there finally got in. He was trying to make light of it, saying he was getting into the spirit of Halloween, joking about how maybe we should all get exorcised just in case something latched onto us all those years ago. But I think he's deeply bothered by everything that happened. I know I still am a little. I still get nervous around dark wooded areas. I don't know what I think was out there in the forest behind our house at night, but I get the feeling that, given the chance, it would have swallowed us whole.
That story gave me goosebumps. You did a great job.
My first paranormal story ever.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the first time you've read anything spooky to me.
Yeah, never have I ever.
Yeah, 1 out of 10 would not recommend.
Now let me go ahead and actually provide one comment from our OP in the comment section. Although, for any listeners wanting to go ahead and delve further into this, please feel free. She does actually put down more comments in the comment section. But the OP says, I'm sure there's a few experiences no one mentioned. My brother in particular was so shaken by it and hasn't spoken about it much. The recent phone call was the first time in years I've heard him mention it. At the time, my parents didn't share their experiences with us much because they didn't want to worry us when we were kids, and I'm pretty sure even now my dad's embarrassed he's even entertaining the possibility of having had paranormal experiences, so it's definitely possible they still haven't told us everything.
Isn't that funny though? Where like you can have a paranormal experience as a kid, your parents look past it, and then later on as you're an adult, they finally divulge some of the stuff that everyone went through, and you're like, wait a second, you too?
But you didn't tell us or warn us? So in case anyone is curious where this happened, our OP says it happened in Larimer, Colorado.
I mean, did anyone have like a guess as to what was going on in the comments? Because they're saying like they're seeing versions of themselves walk into the forest and it's like beckoning them in.
So I know that some commenters were saying that it could possibly be like mimics.
Ooh.
Trying to lure you into the forest, making you think that it is someone that you know so that they can get you.
That's terrifying. Good first story.
Thank you. Well, let's go ahead and go to our next story and see what's happening with the little gray man. I think I woke up to a gray alien in my room last night. I've been up since 5 a.m. and I just can't get this off my mind. So last night I'm sleeping and I'm having a nightmare that I'm in an apartment, looking into a kitchen area, and the drawers, cabinets, and a door to the pantry were all opening, closing, and moving by themselves, almost like poltergeist activity. I was scared in the dream, so I began praying, and then my wife, who was in the bed next to me, kicked my foot and woke me up because I was clearly distressed and mumbling a lot in my sleep. Here's where things get weird. I jump awake because my wife kicked my foot, and feeling relieved to not be having a nightmare anymore, I turn my head towards my wife, who was laying behind me, and say, "Thank you, babe. I'm really sorry about that. I was having a nightmare." But I don't hear any response, so I figure that she's already fallen back to sleep, or might just be so tired that she's still kind of out of it. Then I turn my head back to facing forwards, the direction I was facing the whole time I was sleeping, and I notice something in the corner of the room, standing in front of the bedroom door. The room was dark, but its skin still appeared to be like a dark matte gray color. It was really thin, had thin legs and long thin arms, a small, almost childlike torso, a narrow neck, and then a really big bulbous head with huge black almond-shaped eyes. It looked exactly like a traditional gray alien, but it was slightly transparent. Needless to say, I was shocked, and to be honest, my very first reaction was that I was seeing things because I'd just woken up. So I rubbed my eyes and it's still there. Trying not to panic and trying to come up with a rational explanation for it, I thought this must just be dream chemicals still working in my brain. So I sit up slightly and look into the corner of our bedroom by the closet, expecting to see something there, but there's nothing. Then I look at the ceiling. Nothing. The floor. Nothing. The other wall. Nothing. I look back at the corner by the bedroom door, and it's still there. Standing there completely still, just staring at me with its huge jet black eyes, which were shaped like almonds and appeared to wrap just slightly around the side of its head, much larger than a human's eyes. And it's still slightly transparent, but I'm not seeing it clearly. And only in that one spot too, not anywhere else in the room. Now, because the Texas power grid sucks, I always sleep with a flashlight next to the bed. And after seeing this thing for about a minute and a half, it occurs to me to grab the flashlight. I lean off the bed, reach down and grab the flashlight, and shine it in the corner of the room at this being. And because it's transparent, it becomes much less visible when I shine the light on it. I could still see it very slightly, but it was much less. Again, in disbelief at what I was seeing, I began slowly scanning the whole room with the flashlight. From the bed, of course. I wasn't going to try getting out of bed. I was way too scared, to be honest. And again, I see absolutely nothing strange anywhere in the room at all, except for this thing I can see in the one corner by the bedroom door. I turn the flashlight off, and instantly, I can see it super clearly again, just staring at me. I rub my eyes again and squeeze my eyes together tightly, hoping that when I opened them it'd be gone. But it wasn't. So finally, I began truly freaking out internally, and I just began praying out loud. And after about 20 seconds of praying, I literally watched this thing just fade out of existence / dematerialize right in front of me. It was still standing there, dead still, and staring at me the whole time. It just seemed to suddenly begin becoming increasingly transparent until it was just not there anymore and it was gone. I've been awake since then. Spent the rest of the night reading random stuff here on Reddit to try and distract myself because the experience shook me up quite a bit, to be honest. I was wondering if anyone else here has ever experienced something like this. I feel so genuinely weirded out that I just don't know what to make of it, to be honest.
That's terrifying.
So I will have to say something funny regarding this. One commenter said, "So Greys are afraid of Jesus? I'll have to jot that down for the future." And our OP actually says, "I'm actually Muslim, so I only pray to God."
Okay.
I find it funny when I think of paranormal activity. Personally, for me, I've always thought of the ghosts in particular. But to actually hear the story of a Grey come into the room and just seemingly watch you as if you're the mouse in the cage really creeped me out.
I'm trying to sleep tonight.
It is a little creepy. Well, let's go ahead and go to our very last story. And this one's called The Creepy Encounter.
Oh no.
It's about 1:40 a.m. and I need to run to the bathroom. As I pass the hallway, I glance at the door. It is completely shut. I sit down, and from behind me, I can hear my mom and my younger brother talking in the front garden, and I can't make out what they're saying. Being inside, I finish and wipe, but midway through, I hear the front door open. I finish and flush. The door is still open. I think it's a bit odd considering that we have cats that love shooting outside, so I peel around the doorway to see if someone is standing in the doorway. There isn't. I quickly walk outside and I feel the very strong presence of someone walking around the side of the house, so I peel around and again, no one. I get a bit scared and turn back. As I was closing the door, I hear from the other side, clear as day, a scratchy voice. My mom's voice. In a way that I can only describe as being in pain, without water for a week. Parched voice. It was so dry. I lock the door in a panic and walk into the living room where my mom, who I thought was outside, is fast asleep on the couch. I turned to my older brother and explained what happened, and his face pales. He explains my younger brother 20 minutes before had heard the same thing. He says that it came from the house. It sounded like a pained, exhausted voice calling to him. It's now 2 days later, and I'm still trying to figure out what it could be.
What could it be?
Could be the house. Could be a ghost. Could be something trying to lure it away from the family.
That's pretty spook. I think it was super creepy the way they described the voice being like out of breath and it coming from the mother.
Like it's parched and it hasn't drank. That croaky sound.
I thought you were about to do a voice.
I don't think I could go that dry. No, I sound like a velociraptor.
So are we talking like this is another mimic situation?
So someone said, "Congrats, you and your brother just encountered a mimic." Another person says, "Demons act. Be careful and keep that door closed."
Well, we don't really dabble in this realm, but these stories are very interesting, that's for sure.
They are.
Well, was that our last spooky story?
That was our last spooky story. As our stories come to a close, always watch for the unusual, perceive the extraordinary, keep your mind awake and your eyes open, listeners.
Look at you giving me goosebumps.
Yay! If you have enjoyed listening to us read and talk about today's stories, please rate, subscribe, and turn on notifications for new content. We do most of our stuff on the AITA forum, but we would love to hear your feedback on these paranormal story times. People's experiences get pretty deep, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the Saturdays that we have going forward with all of these paranormal story times.
And with that, if any of our listeners out there want to provide any of their paranormal experiences, please feel free to send us an email. Maybe we'll cover it.
Yes, we would love to hear your experiences, especially when it comes to the paranormal.
And remember, if you post it, maybe I'll still be able to sleep tonight.